God's peace be with you today. I trust that the word I have for us today will be helpful and encouraging for us in these days. So let me ask you a question. During these times of sheltering in place and social distance restrictions, what have you done to entertain yourself? I know that some of you have been doing puzzles. My wife loves to do puzzles, and she's done a number of them during these weeks. This is our favorite puzzle, as you can imagine it is. That's Katie and I and our 3 grandchildren. You might think this is a preacher trick to convince you how adorable our grandchildren are, which of course they are. But I'm making a bigger point here. I think a puzzle is a wonderful metaphor for the church, the family of faith, for St. Luke. Though we're many parts, many pieces, we all fit together in one family of faith. And that is a life-giving experience. It helps us to be more like Jesus. So if you remember nothing else from today's sermon, please remember this. Being fit together in a family of faith helps us to be spiritually fit. So what is the worst thing when it comes to puzzles? What is the worst when it comes to puzzles is when pieces go missing. We'll search all day even for one piece that's gone missing. But when anyone in our family of faith begins to no longer feel a part or to fit in, or maybe even worse, starts to feel driven away for some reason and begins to disconnect, well, that causes feelings within everyone to rise, feelings of conflicted, confused dissatisfaction. So how are we going to react to that? What should be the outcome that we work towards? What does love require of us at a time like that? Let's again return to our puzzle and think about reasons why people have left our church or left churches. And imagine what we hope will be the outcome when they've left because of an unresolved conflict. So, for example, someone might think they've been treated unkindly or been hurt, and we hope that there'll be reconciliation and forgiveness, and they'll be back fit together with us. Maybe someone doesn't like the pastor's sermons, and we hope that they can start to get something out of the pastor's sermon, or if all else fails, maybe they'll like the new associate pastor's sermons. Someone may disagree with the direction of the church or how the church spends its money or talks about money too much. And what we hope is that they'll be with us again to help lead the church into the future and make it all that much better. Sometimes people have left because there's been a change to worship styles or worship times. And worship is important, and we want people to find meaning, and we hope that they will again give us a try and be back with us and begin to get meaning and purpose out of our worship experiences. People have sometimes left because of the politics that they imagine are in the leadership of the church or in the denomination. And what we hope is that we'll all see that while politics are important, they're not as important as being fit together into the family of faith and serving a greater purpose of connecting people into a growing relationship with Jesus. Oftentimes, people leave the church because they become bored or disinterested, and what we hope is that there'll be a renewal of faith and that they will again find meaning and purpose by being connected to a family of faith. And there could be other reasons that we could continue to list. And what we hope is that all those reasons will be reconciled. And if there's forgiveness needed, that'll happen. And conflicts can be resolved and they can be back together with us again. What about this one? What happens if someone disagrees with one of our essential beliefs? What's in our creeds? What if, for example, someone doesn't believe that Jesus actually rose from the dead? That is particularly hard when that situation occurs. When someone in our family of faith goes missing for one of these reasons we just articulated with the puzzle, it's hard. It can be complicated. When someone in our family of faith no longer is with us because of an unresolved conflict, we can feel conflicted ourselves. We can feel that we're not so fit together as we had been. And we can start to behave in ways that maybe sometimes aren't helpful. So the question, when we're in that situation of someone beginning to disconnect because of an unresolved conflict, the question is, what does love require of us? Of me, of you, of us? What does love require? We've been in this series since Easter titled, What's Possible Now? We've been learning from the experiences of the earliest Christian church, those followers of Jesus in the weeks and months that followed his resurrection, as they began to live with that new reality of the resurrection of Jesus, and we're asking what's possible now. We've been trying to learn from them for our own situation today. As we look forward to a kind of resurrection sometime in the future when this pandemic begins to pass, and we're going to be asking what's possible for us now. And when you are dealing with the issue of unresolved conflict within the family of faith, it causes people to start to go missing. What's possible now and what love requires of us is really answered in the letters of the Apostle Paul. For example, in what we read today from 1 Corinthians. Paul begins by saying, I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Do you see what Paul is doing? He's invoking the authority of Jesus. He's saying, this is what love requires of us. If you're going to love like Jesus taught us to love, this is what is required. And then he goes on to say this extraordinary statement, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly united in mind and thought. That's extraordinary. That we all agree with one another, that there be no divisions among us, that we be perfectly united in mind and thought. I mean, you read that and you ask naturally, is that really possible? Well, I think the Apostle Paul thought it is possible. In fact, this is what love requires. When you read through the letters of the Apostle Paul, one of his major themes is this, that of greatest importance for the family of faith is to be united. That being united in the family of faith is second only to the gospel of Jesus Christ itself. Paul called the earliest Christians to a very high standard of unity. Here he calls it being perfectly united. And as crazy as it sounds, I think it's possible because we have the Holy Spirit with us and among us to unite us. And I think I can hold out to you what I call a three-part framework, or maybe better think of it as a three legs to a stool. A framework for how we can be perfectly united and to answer the question, what does love require of us? When I take the letters of the Apostle Paul and I put it together with the Greek words that he used in this passage that we read, what Paul is teaching here is this, that we are united, perfectly united. The word literally means to be fit together like a puzzle. We are fit together in our essential beliefs and purpose. What does that mean? Well, our essential beliefs are what are in our creeds, our core beliefs. A creed is taking the whole of the Bible and squeezing it down into a few paragraphs, our essential beliefs. And our essential purpose, our primary purpose, is what Jesus gave us in the Great Commission, to make disciples of all nations. We articulate that here at St. Luke by saying our purpose is to connect people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. That's our mission statement. Paul is saying we are united in our essential beliefs and purpose. Paul is not talking about here when we have differences of opinion or some disagreement about this lesser important thing. He's talking about we have to be perfectly united in our essential beliefs and purposes, and we are. In fact, we have to be. If, for example, on a Sunday morning, Pastor Mike got up and rightly said that Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, and if the next Sunday I, for some odd reason, would say, no, Jesus didn't rise from the dead, that we can't have that. We have to be united in those. Jesus' resurrection is one of our essential beliefs. Or on the other hand, if I got up on a Sunday morning and said, as I just did, that our mission, our essential purpose is to connect people in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And the next Sunday, Mike would get up and say, our essential purpose is to build a beautiful church building. We can't have that. We have to be united in our essential beliefs and purpose. And we are. That's what fits us together. And when we're fit together in this way, it helps us to be spiritually fit. What about the second leg of this framework? Well, that has to do with our beliefs or practices that aren't so commonly held, that we have some legitimate differences about. For example, our understanding of baptism and Holy Communion. You know that within the Christian church, there's a variety of understandings about those two sacraments. We have ours that are important to us, but others different. In fact, even within our congregation of St. Luke, we have folks that have different understandings of baptism and Holy Communion. Or when it comes to practices, we know that. We have some that like the traditional service and some that like the contemporary service. You see, when it comes to these matters, we give each other liberty. We give each other freedom. So when it comes to essential beliefs and practice or purpose, we have unity. When it comes to these things that we kind of have differences about, that aren't so core or so central to who we are, we give each other liberty. And then the third leg of the framework for being perfectly united has to do with charity, with love, that over all things, we put charity. So the Apostle Paul writes in Colossians chapter 3, verse 14, that above all things put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. That even in our differences, even in our unity, we cover all things with charity, with love. So even if there's someone who doesn't agree with one of our essential beliefs, who's been in our family of faith, we're going to continue to show love and charity for that person. And maybe it'll be the case that they will belong before they actually believe. But in all things, we're going to show charity. I bet you were wondering whether we were ever coming back to that missing piece, if we're going to put it back in the puzzle. You've been wondering about that. But that's what love requires. So if we take this three-legged framework for having perfect unity to being fit together in the family of faith, in essential beliefs and purpose, we have unity. In things that are non-essential, we have liberty. But in all things, we show charity. So as we look forward to moving out of these social distance restrictions and begin again to meet in person and worship in our life groups and our service opportunities, it's possible that we might experience some conflict. We've been cooped up. We're anxious to be together again. And I would imagine for many of us, there's a desire like, let's get back to the way things were. And that may cause some conflict because I don't know if we're going to get back to the way things were before, at least just right away. And there may be some conflict because of that. Our frustrations may rise up. For example, the wearing of a face covering. I would imagine that for many churches, as we first come back together in public worship, that's going to be a protocol that we're going to ask people to do. And yet, there's going to be people who don't want to do that. There's going to be people who that's physically difficult for. And there are going to be others who say, You got to wear one to protect me. So there may be some conflict there. Or it's also possible that some other things that we want to be back to the way the things they were before aren't. And that's going to cause frustration and conflict. There are some new possibilities ahead of us that we can discover for advancing God's mission. But as we know, when there's change, conflict happens. Or maybe it's something even farther in the future that we'll have a conflict about. Can we agree that when we experience conflict within the family of faith, that we will do whatever it takes to resolve those conflicts so that we can remain fit together? Because we know that when we are fit together, united in the family of faith, we are spiritually fit. So here's the next step. If you have a conflict, an unresolved conflict with someone in our family of faith, or if you experience that in the future, can you commit to do what you need to do to resolve that conflict? And if that's where you're at, can you already now begin to reset your mind to prepare yourself to live in unity within the family of faith? To be fit together. Because being fit together in the family of faith helps us to be spiritually fit. May God's peace be with you today, dear ones.